Our favorite Caped Crusader has come across a ton of villains throughout his journey on the big screen. From the plethora of Joker iterations to iconic characters like the Penguin, it's time to rank every single live-action Batman villain from worst to best. Before we get started, don't be afraid to tell me who your favorite or least favorite Batman villains are in the comments down below. Starting at last place, Two-Face in Batman Forever. It genuinely doesn't get any worse than Tommy Lee Jones' Two-Face. This villain is arguably the bottom of the barrel when it comes to Batman's live-action villains. Tommy Lee Jones does almost nothing of any substance throughout Batman Forever. He doesn't act like Two-Face, he doesn't care about trying to bring Two-Face to life, nor the world of comics, and it's almost impressive how much effort he's putting into almost purposely ruining Batman Forever. All of this can be traced back to a few things, such as Tommy Lee Jones having issues behind the scenes with Jim Carrey, and him simply not understanding comic book movies as highlighted by Joel Schumacher in an interview. What solidifies Tommy's Two-Face as the worst Batman villain though, is the simple fact that he straight out disappears in Batman Forever, and that he does pretty much nothing of substance. He's so busy laughing like a generic villain, running around, acting ridiculous, and simply doing almost nothing of any consequence at all that it's frustrating as a viewer to watch. Funnily enough, it almost feels like the production team of Batman Forever were so frustrated by what he was doing with Two-Face, since it was so poor and awful, that they cut all of his footage for the middle portion of Batman Forever's theatrical version. He's in the beginning of the movie, but then he suddenly disappears for the rest of the movie until he magically reappears in Riddler's headquarters with Jim Carrey's Riddler, which for context is at the end of Batman Forever. That's it. Honestly, I can't blame them if this was a conscious decision. His iteration of Two-Face is low effort, laughably bad, it's terrible, and the worst live-action Batman villain by far. Number 17, Bane in Batman and Robin. While Batman and Robin's iteration of Bane isn't terrible like Tommy Lee Jones' Two-Face, it's still not good whatsoever. In Batman and Robin, Bane is a test subject that gets injected with a drug called Venom, which leads to him becoming this muscular, mindless abomination who gets controlled by Poison Ivy. Why? So he can become her bodyguard to protect her from Batman and Robin, and so he can serve as an obstacle for Batman and Robin to overcome. Then he eventually dies at the end of the movie in a pathetic and forgettable fashion. Honestly, that's pretty much it. He doesn't really do anything memorable or worth caring about, which is why he's ranked so low on this list. All in all, Bane leaves a lot to be desired, but unlike Tommy Lee Jones, he doesn't anger you enough to really feel any way toward him. Number 16, Max Shreck in Batman Returns. If you don't remember Max Shreck from Batman Returns, I don't really blame you. Max Shreck is an incredibly forgettable original character who was made just for Batman Returns. Well, that's a major reason as to why he's so low on my list. Unlike Two-Face in Batman Forever and Bane in Batman and Robin, Max at least serves somewhat of a role in the plot of Batman Returns. In the film, all Max Shreck does is try to kill Selina Kyle and work with the Penguin. If you're curious, yes, both of these things go incredibly poorly, considering these two goals lead to Max finding himself getting kidnapped by the Penguin and dying by the hands of Selina Kyle. So it's not like we can't say that Max didn't at least have a full arc. The funniest thing about Max though is that at the very end of Batman Returns, for some odd reason, Max couldn't process or understand that Bruce is Batman after Bruce reveals himself to Selina in front of Max. He, and I quote, reacts to this ending moment by asking, "Bruce, why are you dressed as Batman?" Instead of saying something like, "Bruce Wayne is Batman?" That, along with Max Shreck being a generic character who dies by the hands of the very character he tried to kill, is why he's so low on this list. Number 15, Talia al Ghul in The Dark Knight Rises. Like a majority of The Dark Knight Rises, Talia al Ghul doesn't really do much for me. While her existence is vital, considering she essentially allows the Dark Knight trilogy to have a full circle feel, she doesn't really do anything memorable in the movie. She basically shows up, sleeps with Bruce Wayne, turns on him to remind us that the League of Shadows still exists in this universe, and then she eventually reveals the actual truth regarding Bane's origin story. This, no matter how you put it, makes her nothing more than a glorified plot device. Despite this, one of her biggest issues is that it doesn't help that most people only remember her due to her terrible death towards the end of The Dark Knight Rises. I won't harp on it too much considering how many more villains we have to go through, but yeah, her death is still ridiculously pathetic all these years later. What also hasn't allowed this iteration of Talia al Ghul to age well is the fact that we've gotten to see newer iterations of Talia al Ghul do far more interesting things in newer forms of DC related media. Whether it's Batman Arkham City or the Arrowverse in which she was a long-term character, the newer iterations of Talia make it hard to genuinely like Talia al Ghul in The Dark Knight Rises. She's a lackluster character who unfortunately left a lot to be desired all these years later. Number 14, The Riddler in Batman Forever. Unfortunately, Jim Carrey was dealt a bad hand of cards when it comes to his iteration of the Riddler in Batman Forever. From dealing with whatever Tommy Lee Jones was doing with Two-Face, to needing his Riddler to be toned down just a bit, Jim Carrey just couldn't shine as much as he should have in this movie. Where Jim Carrey strives the most with Enigma is the rapid downfall into insanity, watching Ed go from the biggest fan of Bruce Wayne to eventually hating him and losing himself to the point where he becomes this massive vigilante is legitimately phenomenal and believable. I just wish that they toned down the Riddler a bit more to actually balance the character out in Batman Forever. The Riddler is such a vibrant and bright personality that he almost feels like he belongs more in Batman and Robin than in Batman Forever. His Riddler needed a few more serious scenes and a more original personality that doesn't feel a little too close to the Joker. This would give him depth and make his character far more in line with everything else going on within this film. That said, I still do enjoy the Riddler in Batman Forever. He's arguably the saving grace because without him, I don't know if I'd ever entertain the idea of revisiting Batman Forever again in the future, considering just how serious Batman Forever is. Again, it's just unfortunate that his character never got to live up to his potential due to other elements of this movie holding him back from reaching his potential more so than him actually being a bad character. Number 13, Ra's al Ghul in Batman Begins. I made this abundantly clear in my video about the Dark Knight trilogy, but to reiterate, I don't like Liam Neeson's iteration of Ra's al Ghul. Liam Neeson in this role does absolutely nothing for me at all. There are only two reasons as to why this character is above Talia and Jim Carrey's Riddler. Firstly, his existence allowed Batman Begins to give us one of the coolest scenes in the trilogy, which is Bruce flying away as Batman after his fight with Ra's in the train towards the end. Secondly, and more importantly, Ra's actually serves a purpose in Batman Begins. His role is to trick Bruce into thinking he's being trained by someone else, which eventually leads Bruce into finally becoming Batman, along with Ra's facing off with Batman in the latter half. If it weren't for Ra's having such a massive presence and an actual impact on the story of Batman Begins, I'm pretty confident that he'd be put even lower on this list, and it's for an understandable reason. The bigger problem I have with Ra's al Ghul is the fact that this movie tries to poorly connect him to the secondary antagonist of Batman Begins. The idea of the movie simply being like, yeah, behind the scenes, Ra's is actually working with this dude to try and take down Gotham and Batman still isn't believable all these years later. In fact, it's poor storytelling if I'm being honest, considering how long this movie spends setting up a bunch of massive payoffs in the latter half of Batman Begins. Like, you mean to tell me that we couldn't get a couple of scenes of Ra's al Ghul working on these plans after spending so much time setting up this character for an entire half of the movie? It makes no sense at all, and it's why I have little to no positive things to say about Ra's al Ghul. Number 12, the Rogue Gallery in Batman 66. I absolutely adore the Rogue Gallery in Batman 66. For better or worse, they're probably the textbook definition of comic book characters brought to life. They're ridiculous, whimsical, over the top, and shockingly believable thanks to how realistic Batman 66's universe is. As someone who recently watched this movie for the first time ever, I appreciate just how much love was put into every single villain of the movie. The two highlights from this lovable and ridiculous group are Penguin and Riddler. You can tell just how much influence their characters have on the modern takes of them, and you can also see why these iterations of Penguin and Riddler are so loved to this day. The problem though is that this rogue gallery really ends up blending into itself as one massive personality. It's only in the moments where Penguin, Riddler, Joker, and Catwoman are specifically doing something in the movie where they actually get to shine, or at least showcase the different personality traits that make them stand out from one another. Another flaw, at least in my opinion, is the fact that each member ends up slowly fading out of importance in the movie after doing one or two things. Catwoman just kind of sits around doing nothing in the latter half of Batman 66. Joker does almost nothing but act like a fool to a bit of an obnoxious extent. And then there's Riddler and Penguin who carry this collective group of villains. As much as I love this ridiculous group of villains, it's hard to put these characters any higher on this list, even though I have a massive amount of love and respect for them. They're entertaining, they're hilarious, and they manage to keep your attention from start to finish. However, after watching this movie, you can't help but be thankful that we have much better iterations of these iconic characters today. Number 11, Mr. Freeze and Batman and Robin. Due to the tone, colors, and universe of Batman and Robin, Mr. Freeze to me was the perfect villain for Batman and Robin. In the best way possible, it almost feels like someone ripped Mr. Freeze straight out of a comic book and brought him to life, except he never once adapted to the tone of the real world. His unapologetic puns, jokes, and vibrant personality genuinely amplifies the ridiculousness of Batman and Robin and helps make the whole movie fun. What I think goes unnoticed or underappreciated about Arnold's Mr. Freeze is that his iteration actually has a decent amount of depth in him. Even though he's basically bouncing around as this chaotic villain for a majority of the movie, there's still a serious story within his iteration of Mr. Freeze that eventually allows him to finally make the turnaround needed for the sake of Gotham City, which is revealed in a way that shockingly sticks the landing. He's not this ridiculously obnoxious one-note character that never sees any level of character growth. There's a semi-decent, albeit half-assed storyline that works for Mr. Freeze and Batman and Robin. Now, in the grand scheme of things, does this make him a good villain, let alone a good character? No, not really. However, he's not poorly done to the point where I hate him, find him annoying, or think any of the characters that we've ranked up until this point are better than him. Mr. Freeze is a fun, enjoyable character that brings the best out of Batman and Robin, the movie and the characters, and it's time we stop pretending otherwise. Number 10, Scarecrow in Batman Begins. Scarecrow is such a fantastic character throughout the Dark Knight trilogy. He's so good that he's probably the best thing about Batman Begins. However, he has a major flaw that can't be ignored, and that's him being criminally underutilized. We absolutely deserved far more Scarecrow in this trilogy because when given the time to shine, Cillian Murphy does so in the role of Scarecrow. Maybe I'm wild for thinking this, but Cillian could have easily carried Batman Begins on his back without Liam Neeson playing Ra's al Ghul, and it would have been a better movie because Scarecrow is that much better of a character. There's never a moment where you're not feeling tense when Scarecrow's on the screen in the latter half of Batman Begins. There's never a moment where Scarecrow's outfit or visual effects look terrible either. It's just that he's so underutilized and has so few scenes that he's never really given the time to actually take over the movie or spend enough time on screen to truly establish himself as a powerful villain. So really, I can't logically put him any higher on this list even though I really want to. What could put Cillian Murphy higher is if he somehow managed to reprise the role of Scarecrow in Matt Reeves' Batman universe. However, for now, Scarecrow from Batman Begins will stay at number 10 on this list. Number 9, the Riddler in The Batman. I like the Batman's Riddler, and I think he's a pretty good character, but there's a reason he's at number 9 on this list. His introduction in the Batman is stellar because it does such a great job at immediately setting the tone for the Batman. Plus, his riddles are more than good enough, and I love how threatening he feels despite him just being a regular person in this universe. However, this character's biggest weakness to me is that firstly, he's probably the least interesting character in the Batman universe at this very moment, and secondly, I need him to dig much deeper in respective future Batverse content. I need him to go all out with acting ridiculous, assuming he eventually breaks free from Arkham Asylum at some point in the future. If he does, I need him to be like the Riddler from the Gotham show. He needs to become arrogant, constantly be wreaking havoc, spinning out riddles that annoy Bruce, and do his job of being a character that seems to never go away. That's why people loved Gotham's Riddler, and that's why the Riddler in the Batman Arkhamverse rose to become a beloved character as well. At this point in time, Paul Dano only does a fantastic job at being this threatening serial killer that basically sinks Gotham underwater, which like most people, I hope leads to us getting Mr. Freeze as soon as possible in the Batman Part 2. I need him to become more than just that though, and I have faith that Matt Reeves will continue to grow this character across different shows or movies. My one hope, however, is that he gets a better costume, because that costume is a perfectly fine starting point, but it needs to become better one way or another. So yeah, the Riddler is a perfectly fine villain who does a lot of things right, but I'm ranking him this low because he has a ton of room to grow, and if he does improve, he could easily jump up my rankings of Batman villains. Number 8, the Penguin in Batman Returns. I adore Danny DeVito's iteration of the Penguin. It's hilarious, ridiculous, and at times really disgusting. I think what makes this iteration of Oswald Cobblepot so popular is the simple fact that it's incredibly absurd, from his story to his personality to his costume. This character in Batman Returns is arguably one of the most ridiculous comic book characters ever transformed into live action. Although that works to his character's benefit, I do think it's kind of harmed how he's aged over time. As much as I love this character, it's hard to not get tired of him after multiple rewatches over the years. Like, yes, I love how this character somehow manages to basically become public enemy number 1 in Gotham. The rise and fall of Oswald Cobblepot is legitimately interesting to watch because it's so over the top. However, with how absurd Oz acts and with the things he does, the amount of semi-gruesome shots become a bit groan-inducing because of the other Penguin iterations we have today. Like, there is no way anyone could tell me that this iteration of Penguin is better than Gotham's Penguin or even Colin Farrell's Penguin, whom we'll be talking about shortly. Yes, I love and appreciate the absurdity that Danny DeVito brought to this character, but I never say that this character is my definitive Penguin or my favorite Penguin. I just think in the context of Batman Returns, he and Catwoman both work tremendously because that movie is like the most unserious sequel that could have ever been made after Batman 89. Then again, this iteration of Penguin does get a full-on army of literal penguins with rockets on their backs. So what do I know, right? Number 7, Catwoman in Batman Returns. Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman is cherished, and it's for a good reason. Her Catwoman's arc is a fairly good balance of comical and seriousness. Selina Kyle is, honestly, unintentionally funny at times. You can't help but laugh at some of her ridiculous moments, such as how she acts when she comes back to life, or how she acts when she's running around in her historically well-known uncomfortable Catwoman costume. However, despite some of these funny moments, I think what makes Catwoman such a great character in Batman Returns is that her arc ends in probably the best way possible. She goes from being this worker that is nearly killed by her obnoxious and terrible boss, Max Schreck, to becoming a full-on vigilante with cat-like powers who finally gets her revenge at the end of the movie by killing him. It's a literal full-circle arc. Are there shenanigans involved, such as her acting like a cat? Yeah, absolutely, but it never gets in the way of her character simply being a good character. Although we don't see enough of their dynamic, I genuinely do love the push and pull dynamic between Bruce and Selina throughout Batman Returns. The whole will they, won't they dynamic is probably the most interesting part of Batman Returns, considering how different and similar they are. Just like Selina's arc, I love that their dynamic ends with Bruce, yet again, experiencing a tragedy even though he tries everything in his power to be the hero Gotham needs in Batman Returns. This iteration of Catwoman set the blueprint for the same exact relationship or dynamic people want today out of Batman and Catwoman, and maybe one day I'll make an entire separate video discussing the highs and lows of every live-action Catwoman. Number 6. The Penguin in the Batman. The Penguin in the Batman is arguably the highlight of the movie for me. Even though, yes, we've yet to really get much out of Oz from the Batman, I think it's fair to say that he's earned the high praise he's received. This iteration of Penguin has managed to arguably do everything that Gotham's Penguin has done and better. Colin Farrell is incredibly entertaining, whether it's because of him being ridiculously snarky or straight up funny. In my genuine opinion, he has the best line of the Batman, and it's because of the context and delivery of the line. We get all this build up with Gordon and Batman figuring out the Riddler's puzzle only for them to be stuck on the most basic Spanish ever, which leads to Penguin saying, "World's greatest detectives, am I the only person who knows the difference between L and La?" On top of that, I love the highs and lows that Colin manages to depict during the massive chase scene in the Batman. There is almost nothing more entertaining than watching such an intense set piece filled with Oz going through such a range of emotions only for him to finally get caught while having arguably the best perspective we get of Batman in the movie. It's absolutely amazing, and it's why I can't wait for the Penguin HBO Max show. Oswald Cobblepot has already become my favorite Batman villain over the years, along with Mr. Freeze, and the fact that we're getting an even bigger deep dive with this character is such a blessing. I can't wait to see how Oz is affected by the flood in Gotham City. I can't wait to see how Oz manages to bounce back with his mob. I can't wait to see who's introduced as some of his actual friends, acquaintances, and of course, his enemies. This character was already stellar in the Batman, and I feel like he's only going to go up from here as we experience his upcoming HBO Max show. Number 5. Harvey Dent / Two-Face in The Dark Knight. In my opinion, Aaron Eckhart's Harvey Dent is incredibly overlooked, understandably so. It's hard to appreciate and focus on how much effort he put into Harvey Dent when you have a legendary performance happening in the same movie as well. That being said, I think what I love the most about Harvey in The Dark Knight is the push and pull between him and his eventual descent. I love that we get a small glimpse of just how twisted Harvey Dent actually is, even though he tries to portray this lovable, kind-hearted person for a portion of The Dark Knight. His descent into becoming Two-Face is such a tragedy, and Aaron Eckhart manages to do so much with this character, unlike Tommy Lee Jones. His madness becomes more and more apparent as we reach his eventual fate, which is his unfortunate death. As someone who loves The Dark Knight and hates what Tommy did with Two-Face in Batman Forever, I've grown to appreciate this character so much more than I previously did. Like, sure, Harvey Dent may not be the most memorable character in this movie, but he's incredibly underrated, and it's time for us to give Aaron Eckhart his roses for the love and effort he put into this role. He managed to bring such a fantastic representation of Two-Face to life, and I'm so glad that it exists because we absolutely deserved better after Batman Forever. Number 4. Poison Ivy and Batman and Robin. If there is one thing Batman and Robin got right, it was the casting of Uma Thurman as Poison Ivy. I know that putting her this high might be wild to a lot of people, but what it comes down to is that Uma Thurman was just perfect for this role. She managed to encapsulate the combination of sensuality, chaos, and entertainment that comes with Poison Ivy. She doesn't feel one-dimensional in this role at all. When she needs to turn it up to 10 in a scene, she turns it up to 10. When she needs to showcase and highlight just how much Ivy cares about her plans, she manages to nail that, especially before Ivy gets her powers in Batman and Robin. Honestly, her iteration of Poison Ivy is dazzling alongside Mr. Freeze because it's, pun not intended, the perfect display of hot and cold. Mr. Freeze is the larger-than-life personality, while Ivy has more of this I can get whatever I want personality, which kinda makes her far more serious than you'd think at times. Another thing that works in Uma Thurman's favor is that Ivy's story of going from this nerdy botanist who is ignored to becoming a supervillain that wants to take over the world in Batman and Robin is the perfect tone of serious and comical. The only way this story would work today, at least in my opinion, is if the story was far more serious, or at least far more tragic, until it leads to Ivy becoming a consistently great and entertaining villain on the big screen. Outside of that take, I think Ivy perfectly strives in Batman and Robin, and I can't help but appreciate the effort Uma Thurman put into the role. Joel Schumacher pretty much nailed that casting. Also, I can't help but put Poison Ivy this high because she's the only live-action iteration of this character that we have. She's memorable for all of the right reasons, entertaining, and the perfect dose of chaos that helps bring Batman and Robin to life. Number 3, Bane in The Dark Knight Rises. Bane is an underrated Batman villain, and I'm tired of people pretending otherwise. I love Bane in The Dark Knight Rises, and even if he's not the iteration of Bane we all wanted, here's a genuine hard truth. Without Tom Hardy's Bane, The Dark Knight Rises sucks. I'm sorry, it's the truth. Bane single-handedly carries this movie. There are so many moments where this character shines, such as when he fights Batman in the shadows. Like, come on, that leads to one of the hardest lines in a comic book movie ever said. Ah, you think darkness is your ally? You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it, molded by it. I didn't see the light until I was already a man. By then it was nothing to me but blinding. Bane coming out onto the Gotham football stadium and telling Gotham to take control of their city is arguably one of the few moments in the Dark Knight trilogy where a character actually feels like they control the fate of Gotham City. Unlike Heath Ledger's Joker, who we automatically gravitate to for all of the right reasons, Bane demands your attention time and time again. Every single moment from start to finish, he has an incredibly powerful presence and feels like a genuinely formidable foe that Batman may potentially lose against at the end of the movie. Even when we think Bane is nothing more than just a one-dimensional villain, Talia's storyline in The Dark Knight Rises humanizes him and gives him just the right amount of depth that makes us actually understand how Bane became who he is. His tragic downfall is a genuinely compelling story, even if it's a bit corny considering it has to do with him loving and protecting Talia. Regardless, without Tom Hardy putting on this stellar performance, there is no way in hell that The Dark Knight Rises ages well. Tom Hardy's performance of Bane, alongside the stellar production of the Nolan trilogy and the music that constantly keeps you on edge, genuinely makes Bane one of the best live-action Batman villains ever. Number 2, Joker in Batman 89. Jack Nicholson's Joker is the perfect encapsulation of a villain who just doesn't care at all, and I love it. His Joker doesn't respect Batman, doesn't care about the damage he causes in Gotham, doesn't care about preserving art apparently as well, and he has zero regard for human life. His Joker is literally pure chaos to the point where he's so chaotic, he makes Heath Ledger's Joker feel like he somewhat cares about human life. Watching Joker run around causing havoc in Gotham in Batman 89 is way more entertaining than it has any right to be. There isn't a single moment where this character isn't fun, isn't entertaining, and doesn't deserve his screen time. Jack Nicholson took what was arguably the weakest live-action Joker, aka Cesar Romero's Joker in Batman 66, and took it to such an unimaginable height in terms of quality that I'm so thankful that we have this Joker. Jack Nicholson took the concept and idea that Cesar Romero left with his Joker and turned him into a far better character to the point where I think it's fair to say that Jack Nicholson's Joker is iconic just like Michael Keaton's Batman. Jack took the bar with this character and left it sky high after Batman 89, but then Heath Ledger came in and took it even higher. Although Jack's Joker doesn't really have a ton of depth outside of being a chaotic force in Batman 89, it's easy to say, or at least think, that without Jack's Joker, there probably is no Joker from Mark Hamill or Heath Ledger. These two characters are the best Batman villains, and I don't think that's up for debate. So while we're at it, let's talk about the iconic, the legendary, and the rightfully ranked #1 Batman villain, Heath Ledger's Joker. Unsurprisingly, Heath Ledger's Joker is the best live-action Batman villain of all time, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. The Dark Knight is iconic, legendary, and loved for a multitude of reasons, but I think it's fair to say that Heath Ledger is the reason why people hold that movie so close to their heart. He put so much love, effort, and thought into his Joker that even after all these years, people still adore his Joker when we're not supposed to. Joker is a bad person. In fact, he's a terrible person. He kills so many people, causes such a massive amount of chaos for Gotham City as a whole, and yet you almost feel bad that he gets caught by Batman at the end of the movie. You want another pun, another joke, another catchphrase, or statement from the Joker that you'll continue to quote for the rest of your life. It's all because Heath Ledger's Joker was written so carefully and so perfectly that he's entertaining the entire time. There has yet to be another villain outside of Thanos who, in my opinion, isn't remotely close to the quality of Heath's Joker due to him being weaker in Avengers Endgame, that has the same amount of quotable lines, memorable moments, and equivalent power and presence that the Joker had in The Dark Knight. I truly think that Heath Ledger's Joker is not only the best live-action Batman villain of all time, but arguably the best live-action comic book movie villain of all time. There is not a single complaint or negative thing that I can say about the Joker in The Dark Knight, and I guess that's because I've finally met an unstoppable force. Heath Ledger's Joker is iconic, legendary, loved, and held in such an incredibly high regard for all of the right reasons.